Today I'm going to show you how to repair the power button or lock button on an iPhone 4. This one is a little bit different than the 4S, and these are very prone to having difficulties later on. This one you can actually hear is still clicking. This is a parts phone I'm going to work on. I just haven't come across one that's broken for quite a while. So there are a couple different reasons that these go bad, and depending on whether yours is springing back or not, it may be salvageable, but usually you have to replace the cable on the inside that actuates the power button or lock button. So most likely we're going to need these tools here. I've got a pair of tweezers, a plastic pick spudger, another pry tool, and then of course if you have one of the later model iPhone 4s, you will need a pentalobe driver. This one happens to have a Phillips screw in the bottom, and it's actually missing one, so you'll need to have the appropriate driver, of course. So what we're going to do, and again, you can always skip ahead if you're already familiar with the disassembly process. You will have to remove the logic board for this procedure. What we're going to do is start by taking both of the screws out of the bottom of the phone, and of course you're going to want to remove your SIM card reader, because this will be a requirement in order to remove the logic board. If you have a CDMA version phone without a SIM card tray, you don't have to worry about that. However, the procedure will be different than it is on this phone. So I'll make a video for the Verizon and Sprint version as soon as I get a chance to. Once we take the screws out of the bottom, we're going to slide the rear panel upwards, and you might have to grip this kind of tight to push it straight up. It'll only shift a little bit, but once it does, you should be able to remove the rear panel just like this. And on the inside, we'll have several screws that are going to be removed. I would recommend you start with the battery terminal itself. So there's a screw here that actually secures this in place. We want to go ahead and take that one out first of all. And of course, if you were able to turn the phone off before you begin, you may not be able to unless you go into your accessibility settings. In any case, that is probably the first step I recommend for anyone is always disconnect the power first of all. All right, so now you can have a slightly closer view of this. Now you want to be very careful in this area, the battery terminal itself. This panel, if you're not careful, you can actually tear off the piece that it interfaces with underneath. So we're going to very gently just go under the edge and kind of lift this up. And once it does, you can fold it over this direction, and then you'll see that there's another piece that has to come out here. This is part of the antenna mechanism, and it actually goes over this, and then the terminal goes on top of it. So when you put it back together, we want to make sure we get those in the right order. And then of course, if you have a newer battery, more than likely you'll have to apply some heat here with the heat gun in order to pry it out. And from that point, you can typically take something like a credit card, and you should be able to get in here on the side and pry underneath the battery. This one's going to come out very easily because it has been removed before. Just remember that when you're prying the battery, you only want to pry from this area here. You don't want to affect these cables or put any pressure on the surrounding areas. So once we've got the battery out, we'll have a couple of screws here. Again, feel free to skip forward if you're already familiar with this part of the process. I did want to show it from the beginning, just in case. So we've got two screws. These two screws are not interchangeable. If you put them in the wrong positions, basically if you move this screw over to here, you will damage your SIM card ejector. You won't be able to get your SIM card out of the phone. So make sure you have those in the right order. Remove this little retaining plate that goes over the back of the charging port, the charging port flex cable. And again, we're going to very gently, very carefully lift this up just at the end. Yours will probably have some adhesive under here, so you will most likely want to apply some heat before you begin very carefully peeling this downward, only until you get to about this point, and from here it kind of flips out over this direction. So typically you'll have adhesive under here, adhesive up here. This one's been removed a couple of times before, so we don't see it so much. Now what we want to do is kind of get underneath this little antenna connector and very gently pry that up. And I like to just kind of move it out of the way because we're going to have to pull the logic board out. And you don't have to remove this, but it's going to be a lot easier if you do. So before we go on to this part, let's go ahead and remove the EMI shield up here at the top. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws, as long as all your screws are there. So we want to go ahead and take these out, and again, make sure you keep them in the right order because they are not interchangeable. There's a huge variation in the sizes on these things. You can see this is the really long one that can sometimes be tricky to remove, likes to stick inside the phone. And when you get a look at that, it's a pretty good size screw compared to the rest. So again, not interchangeable. All right, so We'll take out these other three. And usually, let's go ahead and get this out. Usually when you go to remove this tray, it's going to be clipped in right down here. So a lot of times you'll have to take something and just kind of get underneath this little metal piece, but you don't want to, again, be very careful just around these cables here. So if you want to start at the top, or what would be even better probably would be to come in from this side and just kind of release that little clip if it doesn't open up on its own. So once we get that out of the way, and do make sure that you do not lose this little metal piece that is missing from this phone. So you should have a little metal ring that goes right here. If you lose that, you're not going to have any Wi-Fi, and it looks like somebody already lost that when they took this phone apart. From here, we're going to release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flex cables. The first one I start with is the digitizer and the LCD. Very carefully disconnect those, lift them up, and from here you can actually remove the camera. Pull that out and set it aside. And then we'll have 3 more cables here that actually flip down instead of upwards. So be careful that you don't pull anything else up other than these cables. There are a lot of components down here that you want to be careful around. If you happen to knock those off the logic board, you're going to have to get another one. All right, from here we've got a threaded barrel screw that actually sits underneath another screw that we've already taken out. These come out the easiest with a slotted driver, and it definitely helps to magnetize, because if it sticks to the driver, it should actually come out right with it. Otherwise, you'd be digging that thing out with tweezers. And we've got 2 more screws that we're going to remove, one down here at the very bottom, one in the middle of the logic board, and when we do that, the board's actually going to lift up slightly. So we'll take out this one first, and then we're going to kind of take the charging port and the logic board out at the same time. So I'm going to take this screw out over here first, and that's going to make our final screw, this one right here. And you'll see here, as soon as we remove that, everything's just going to kind of lift up out of the phone. You can see it kind of shifted there a bit. And from here, we can actually bring the logic board straight up from the bottom, and then we're going to kind of slide it out and maneuver around all these other cables at the top. And then, of course, our charging port we can also lift out. Be careful of these little metal pieces here. They actually go in up against this ledge, and if you set them on top of this ledge and you push down, they will snap off very easily. Again, that will affect your antenna system. For now, I'm going to fold this over and just kind of stick it inside the phone so that hopefully it'll stay out of my way. You don't want to snag that and cut it. If you do, you're going to have to replace that. Now from the inside, we'll have a little tricky maneuver here we have to do, because we've got to be able to get to this screw down in here, which is behind the lens and LCD cables. And the problem is that if you're not careful, you can actually damage these just from bending them around too much. So and we also want to keep this little sticker on top of these 2 terminals. So if you wanted to, you could actually remove the entire screen. I'm not going to do that this time. If you do, you've got the 4 corner screws all the way around, 1, 2, 3 here. 3 on this side also, and that's not what this video is about. I do want to show you how to do this without actually removing everything, but again, be very careful. If you're not, you can damage this, which means you'll have to replace the screen, which is kind of a drag, but it does happen. So if your button was not springing back, there's a possibility that it's not aligned properly, and sometimes removing these screws and lining it up again will solve your problem. Most of the time it won't, so you'll have to replace the whole flex cable. What I'm going to do is go ahead and remove these 2 top screws just kind of to show you what's going on the inside. And so we're going to do, I'm going to get a smaller driver. So for this particular screw, these little cheapy screwdrivers that come when you buy replacement parts actually comes in handy, because you can see the neck's a lot thinner, so it's easier to fit down inside. And again, very carefully, I'm going to kind of straighten these out and fold them down just a hair, no more than necessary. And from there, we should be able to access this screw right down in here, which is just always kind of a headache to get to. And it doesn't seem to want to turn, so I'll go back to my larger one. All right, so once we get this out, you will see that this little plastic piece right here is what everything connects to. And this little black dot in the center of this button is the reason that these things go out most often. I am not sure what that's called, but if that little black piece comes off, there's no way for the button to click. So I'm not sure why they designed it like this. Traditionally, phones use this little dome-shaped mechanism to actuate power buttons and volume buttons, but for some reason they felt it would be a good idea to add this. I really can't tell you why. Another thing that they did on the inside here of this button, see if we go ahead and take the power button out. This is the actual button itself. There's a little metal disc on the inside, and if you don't have that disc or it slips off, you won't be able to reach the button and press it. So it's just really kind of a goofy arrangement they have in here. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to have to go ahead and take the speaker out of the phone. I would recommend you hit this with some heat because there's a plastic gasket, like a rubber gasket with adhesive underneath it, and you kind of want to keep that gasket sealed if you can. This one again has already been removed, and it looks like they tore the gasket. You can see it actually stuck to the flex cable on the inside. So if you can, try to preserve that. If you're not able to, it's not going to be a deal breaker, but we try to keep these things as close to original as possible. And the next thing we're going to do here, you'll see we have the flex cable right here, and this is what connects to the actual power button, and it will lift up away from here, but it's also going to run over here to where the upper speakerphone mic is located. So what we'll have to do, again, if you've got a heat gun, you want to hit this with a little bit of heat, and then we're going to actually peel this away from the top right here very carefully. Now, if you're replacing this cable, you don't have to worry too much. If it gets damaged, it's not a big deal. But if you're trying to transfer it to another phone, of course, you don't want to damage it in the process. And there's quite a bit of adhesive underneath this thing. So we can go in here, and let's see if we're making any progress. Pull this up. Again, it's very easy to tear this cable, so you don't want to put too much pressure on it. Alright, so you can see that's sort of coming away here on the inside. And once it does, we should be able to remove it from inside like this. So there's quite a bit of adhesive here at the top, so I try to transfer that gasket over to the new part. Alright, so while I was removing this cable, you'll see that this little plastic piece fell out. And what this does is it protects some of the components that are on the inside. If you see those little squares, hopefully camera's focusing. If not, it just basically sits right above where the speaker was, and it goes over the top once we have this installed. So we'll come back and put that in later. More importantly, what you're going to have to do is when you get your new flex cable, it is not going to be attached to this plastic piece here. So what you'll have to do is basically heat this up and pry this away, pretty much this cable right here. We're going to go underneath and we'll pry the old cable off of the plastic piece. And what's nice is they've actually given us two little guides here. So your new flex cable will sit right on top of this piece. There should be some adhesive to hold it in place. If not, you might have to add some. Once we've got that put back together, it's not too tough to transfer this over. And I would recommend on the back of the connector, this little foam piece, if you can, heat that up, take a razor blade or something thin and remove that, transfer it over to the new one. That will help to keep it plugged in. So what we're going to do next is take this, and we do want to get our button inside. For the record, this is going to go with this little metal piece facing downwards, this little hinge looking piece, and this will go right inside of here all the way to the top, just like that. Make sure everything's seated properly, and then we'll start by kind of getting this situated like so. And then we've got the other piece here that actually has to go down inside, and you're going to have to kind of play around with this mic a little bit to make sure it lines up, and be very careful. It's pretty easy to damage this cable, unfortunately. And once we've got this installed, I would start with the outer screw just to stabilize this, keep it in place. So we're going to put this one back in right over here. Sorry about the shadows. And once we get that started, it should hold this in place. Next step is going to be installing the second screw, but before you go that far, put some pressure on the top. Make sure your button is actually clicking, because if it's not lined up right, you're going to have to repeat this whole process. I'm going to try to get this inside from here. This is the second screw, which again is kind of awkward to work in this position, and it can be tricky to get this one threaded. But once we get it in, we should have a clicking button. And from here, remember we had this little plastic piece that fell out, and you can see it's kind of rounded at the top. That allows it to go over this circuitry and kind of just below that little plastic piece. From here, we can move our flex cables back into position, and we're going to set our speaker right inside. Again, it's better if it has the adhesive on it, but it will still function as is, as long as these prongs are lined up properly with the logic board. From here, the rest is pretty much the reverse of the process. We'll take the board and get it underneath the top end. Remember, it does tuck in at the top this way, so you want to get between your two top flexes and the three bottom ones. Make sure you've also got this little plastic piece on the top, or rubber piece, that's going to keep the board from cutting through the cables. And we're going to very carefully maneuver that into place. Now here's the tricky part, and what I like to do at the bottom here is take a clamp like this, because what you're going to do is pretty much get the charging port underneath the logic board, set it into place, make sure that those little metal brackets are behind that ledge we talked about earlier, and then rather than having to hold this with three hands, you can kind of clamp that into place, and that will allow you to get this bottom screw that was shared by both the logic board and the charging port. Get this installed. And once you do that, everything will kind of hold itself together. I'm going to go ahead and put the one on the right hand side. And again, from here, it's pretty much the reverse of how we started. We'll connect the antenna wire, all the flex cables, install the camera, put your EMI shield back in, all the screws together, and hopefully you'll have a functioning power button.
If you found the video helpful, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and feel free to share it on the social media platform of your choice. For more information, visit us on the web at gocellphonerepair.com. Thanks for watching.